Welcome to episode 15 of Out of Bounds, a podcast where I get my social commentary on different topics in today's society. I'm your host, Terry, and today we're talking about a big topic. How do women ask for sex? And so this came up. I'll give you the background. I am Aries. I'm into the zodiacs. And so I recently became part of an Aries Facebook group, and it's a large group and we talk about things. But anyway, someone posted this question, and it was just like kind of, hey, fellow women, how do you ask for sex? And I just thought the answers were so interesting. And it's nothing that was mind blowing, but to see kind of from other people's own words was kind of interesting to me. And so, given the qualitative disclaimer, this isn't like pick option 1, 2, or 3 and then we count how many voted. This is just people giving their own open-ended answers. And so this is my interpretation of those answers. And it's not everybody. I'm not saying this is going to apply to every single person. Look, I think it's like 158,000 people in this group, and it's like 300 comments. So this isn't everybody in the world, but it's a pretty good sample size. And so I'm not saying that you can generally apply this to everybody. But what I found is that most of the answers were describing something that was very nonverbal. It wasn't a direct. It was very indirect or nonverbal. And so when we talk about today in a time where there's a lot of tension between in gender in general, we know the man versus woman thing, the feminist thing, but also the new genders and all these different conversations and the whole Me Too movement, all that Time's Up, all this stuff. And so this topic of sexual assault and all these things are very big. And for me, in anything, I think a lot of times both sides gets buried. Now, I happen to be a man, and so I'm talking about the man side of these things. But even in the topics of race and not looking at the other side and all these different things, I'm not just here to be pro-man. I'm just saying we rarely look at the full side of everything. And so when we're talking about this is not to excuse anything, but I think you don't do a disservice by just labeling people, oh, you're a terrible person, you're a good person. If you don't break down the issues and really get to it, then it doesn't matter much. And so part of that conversation of going into it is toxic masculinity. I talked about that before. People bring that up. But another thing is, within those gender roles of how a man should act and how a woman should act, people got to realize, like, if you really think about it, how are we brought up in sex? And so there's going to be differences throughout the world, differences throughout different cultures, but overarching, I would say it's mostly portrayed as a pursuit to the man. It's like a competition. It's like a hunt, as they say. And so you have to jump through all the obstacles and the hoops to initiate sexual contact with a woman. And so by nature of that, and again, this isn't what it should be. This is just kind of the basic of what we're taught. The woman is supposed to be elusive. It's not supposed to be easy to catch her. And so that goes into the whole, people slut shaming, as they say, you're not supposed to be a hoe. You're not supposed to be sleeping around, promiscuous, all these different things. A lot of that social constructs. And we talked about before kind of the idea that the woman has to be kind of pure and an angel, and that's the one that you want to marry because you wanted to get married because that's the only way you could be taken care of. And then that kind of changed to being sexy once we had the war and there were less men, and so you had to stand out from the other women, and so you had to become now sexy and wear makeup and, be a little more promiscuous. And so we all get to 2019 where all that's different now. And so a woman can choose to do what she wants like a man used to. And so that's kind of all out the window. But we grew up in a society where we were taught, like, okay, a man, you chase a woman, you pursue her, you court her, as they say. And so it used to, I wouldn't say, and again, just because that's what they used to do doesn't automatically make it bad. I'm not saying courting is a bad concept, but I'm just telling you kind of what the extreme comes down to is you chasing somebody. And so the opposite of when you're being chased, or when someone's chasing you, you're being chased and you want to be elusive. And so I would say society has taught women, again, you definitely not supposed to be out and like happy and proud about being a hoe, but you also are not supposed to make it, you're not supposed to be easy to get. People say, oh, she plays hard to get. And so this idea that when it comes to sex, it's just not ladylike for a woman to ask for it. And look, as I've said before, I don't think it's a right or wrong. People can live by the philosophies they want to that aren't illegal and everything. Some people believe in the old school philosophies of the patriarchy. And so if a woman feels that to be a true woman, to be ladylike, you're not supposed to do that, or at least a lot of people were raised in that idea. And so maybe they don't agree with it, but that's just kind of how they were taught. You have to acknowledge you have a lot of women that aren't going to tell you, yes, let's have sex, or ask you, let's have sex. And so when you have a long committed relationship, it might be different when you open up communication. But hey, half of marriages end in divorce. Not every relationship is happy, as we know. Most people can't communicate. And so I would have to guess, and again, this is just me in my experience guessing, that most times you're going to end up with a woman that's not going to tell you. And so in my own experience, I would say is the answers I saw on the Facebook group were matched up, where it's very nonverbal gestures, physical gestures, or, you know, nonverbal communication. I don't know, so many different things. It's just like to the most weird details. Just the way, oh, if I bat my eyes and tilt my head this way, or if I take off my left sock, he knows. And it's just like, I think that's fine when you're with somebody long enough to understand that. But if you're operating that way just in general, and so it's somebody you're not dating, someone you might just met that night or whatever, there is a way you can give off the wrong signal. And again, this is not victim blaming and shame and all that. This is just the facts. And so there's ways you give off the wrong signal. And then on the other side, how men are traditionally taught to chase, you can read the wrong signals all the time, where it's just like, oh, she did this, that must mean she wants it. And so that's where that whole, oh, she dressed like a slut type thing comes from, because it's like, oh, that's her signal that she's going. And so it's problematic on both sides, but we rarely talk about the other side. We usually just talk about men. And so then talking about women, like that stuff is an issue too. And so you can't expect to be nonverbal with someone that you're just now learning to communicate with. You can't do that early on. And one of my biggest complaints in dating in the past, I would say, are women that expect me to be mind readers. I can't stand that. And there's so many, I mean, again, it's not all women, it's just my experience, but I know people that go through that too. And it's this thing where, oh, if you really love me, or if you really know me, or if we're together, you should understand what this meant. You should know what this look meant. You should know when I did this, it meant this. And I hate that. I like direct communication. That's my personal style. But when we're talking about in the concept of sex and sexual assault and all these other things, it's important for direct communication. Again, you've been married 15 years. Okay, different story. Like, whatever. She goes and gets a glass of lemonade and you know it's time to go. Like, whatever. Okay, that's y'all thing, but that's not everybody's situation. And so sexual frustration is another thing, and that maybe it's a different topic, but that's biological and people kind of dismiss it. I mean, people tend to dismiss things they don't go through, but like testosterone and the hormones and the chemicals in the brain, sexual frustration can lead people to do some crazy things. 100%. And so, that comes with personally recognizing your own issues and kind of how to deal with that. But also on top of that is this nonverbal communication where, especially nowadays where people just don't communicate directly that much anyway. And so I feel like there's a clash of men that are confused and don't really know, what they're looking for. Are there just terrible people? Absolutely. And I don't think you're naturally terrible. I think there's reasons you became terrible, but there are terrible people that know good and well what they're doing or wrong. But I think there's a lot of times, and I'm not talking about aggressive assault or anything. I'm talking about just regular brush ups or miscommunications or, like catcalling, like all that. And I hear so much about catcalling and how terrible it is. And it's like, well, you coming from an era where people were taught to chase women and women were taught to be chased. And so that's kind of I'm not saying it's right, but that's a natural progression. People act like, oh, these evil people just started catcalling because they want to hurt people. I don't think that's what it was. And so you get all these concepts wrapped into, well, then how do you know? And you can luck up. Again, every person is different. You can luck up. I've had people in my life that are very direct and that are very open about what they want. It makes it easier, but there's some people that like the thrill of the chase. Men and women. They like to have somebody figure them out. They like somebody to try to pursue them. They like somebody to read their nonverbal. Nonverbal is cute to them. It's sexy. It's a turn on, or that's just the way they feel comfortable communicating. And I just think that we can no longer rely on that. And I'm not saying we all have to be the same way. Again, you can get to a level where that works for you, but I don't think you can operate every day-to-day life, meeting new people or being single or new relationships, hoping and thinking that somebody can guess what you want and then be upset when you get into troubles. And it's not, fair for men to, just do what they want either 100%. I get it that it's frustrating. And again, I'm coming from the male side. I get that it's frustrating trying to read signs, trying to figure out what's disrespectful to her because it's subjective. What's disrespectful to her may not be disrespectful to another person. And what's sexy for her might not be sexy to another person, especially it depends on your experiences. So it's really confusing. You got to take time to learn people. But the problem is there's some people that will just never be direct about what they want. And that I think is a bigger societal problem. So I'm looking down these comments on the Facebook post and, some people in marriages, long relationships, like they're talking about their actual partner. But a lot of people just talking about any men in general. And again, it was just kind of surprising, a little disheartening to me that so many women, there's a few, of course, like I said, even in our group that are like, look, I just tell them what I want. What's the point? I'm like, oh, what else am I supposed to do? But there's a lot that's just like, oh, and then there were even people like real women don't ask for sex and like all these things. So there are a conflation of ideas, I think in the world, mostly in American society, but I think in the world, period, especially in the patriarchy, where women shouldn't ask for sex, or if they do, they have to do it in a sneaky way. It's the same way, like when the conversation about, oh, how many partners have you had? And it's like, well, there's a number that a woman shouldn't be past, and all these societal constructs of what women should do, what men should do, and it hurts both of us. And so I think really thinking through as a woman, how do you ask for sex? How do you show that you want it? And if you are, I would say no matter if you're direct, if you're not direct, however you ask for it, ask yourself why. Why is it that way? Is it for a good reason? Is it for a productive reason? Does it make more sense for you to change that? And then for men, you just have to be more patient. You have to understand people more, that it's not going to be the same every time. So the women you've dealt with in your life, the next woman is not going to be the same way. or that, you know, if it's been bad or good. And so you can't treat everybody the same, exact way. You got to realize that it's going to be different for each person. And then unfortunately, I think it's unfortunately for men and women, but at the end of the day in 2019, you got to wait a lot longer. I mean, you gotta wait. I mean, I joke sometimes with my friends, and you see people joke about it too. Like, you need a permission slip, you need to sign a waiver, you need picture ID, proof of ID, you need photographic evidence of consent. And like, it's a joke, but it's not far off. And today you just have to protect yourself. If it's worth, you know, possibly ending up in a bad situation for you, then go ahead. But for me personally, just wait till you get a clear confirmation. And that's just kind of where it has to be for men. And then for women, don't be trapped by the thing of, oh, I have to wait for him to make the first move. Don't be trapped by that. Men, women, however we identify in 2019, we can all be direct. We can all, make the first move, I would say. So anyway, go to the comment section. Let me know what you think about this topic. What's your answer? How do you act sex? How's your experience with it? Get the conversation started, share it around, thumbs up, subscribe, and until next episode.